My name is Brock Dolman with the Occidental Arts and Ecology Center, and I co-direct our Water Institute and our Bring Back the Beaver campaign with Kate Lundquist. And so I'm going to take the first half of this show, and then I'll stop sharing, and then Kate will be able to, she'll pick it up and do the second half of the show. And then we'll have time for Q&A. So that's our plan. And basically, we're just, yay, look, I see an image turned back to everybody in the audience there. Sure wish we could be down there at Cal Poly with y'all, but here we are in West Sonoma County. And the focus of our talk is really basically taking a more of a statewide perspective and a little bit of some reflections on lessons learned and hopefully some replicable strategies for you all around the realms of coexisting with and ultimately bringing back beavers. And I want to thank Cooper for his amazing talk, super fun, and all the great work down there. You guys are all so blessed to have Cooper and the whole Slow Beaver Brigade and Santa Barbara Beaver Brigade down in your midst already, which is amazing. So I'll just head on to this next one. Let's see. So Occidental Arts and Ecology Center, we're a small 501c3 nonprofit in Western Sonoma County on an 80-acre piece of property there. It's a retreat center, organic farm, community organizing training center in many respects. And so the Water Institute is really focused a lot on collaborative restoration, and we really are doing that from ridgeline river to reef, if you will. And so we like to play with as many folks in the mix as we can, and there's a whole bunch of logos at the bottom of this slide. I'm not going to repeat those, but just to give you a sense about the breadth and scope of the types of federal or state or county or NGO or RCD or private property or tribal groups that we work with, because we really do believe it takes everybody to be able to pull this work off. And so while we do have steelhead up here, Dutch Bill Creek is our watershed, and that's part of the Russian River Basin. And it's not southern steelhead like you all, but we also have Chinook salmon, and we also have the coho salmon. And so for us back in the late 90s, early 2000s, the coho salmon were, in some estimates, by 2000, we were down to 12 fish. And it really kicked off a huge restoration program for them across many agencies and processes. And we kicked in back in the late 90s on that. And there's lots of things to be done to help restore this keystone species, because they're afflicted by the death of 1,000 cuts, if you will. And in the early 2000s or so, in addition to everything else that was being proposed, we started talking about beaver and asking the question, well, what about beaver? And could beaver help and be a partner in the recovery of coho salmon? And that really began this journey of our Bring Back the Beaver campaign. One of the primary sort of lenses that we start with is this, what we call the basins of relations. And so we're really thinking about watersheds, again, from ridge to river to reef, and how do we rethink for restoration, and also what is a reverential and resilient rehydration revolution retrofit, and how do beaver fit into that? And so the full spectrum of watershed work is what we're looking at. But our sense is that when we think like a watershed, you often start in the headwaters. And for us, really the most important headwaters is this one right here. And it's the water in our own dang head. And how do we mitigate cerebral imperviousness to infiltrate the information through the headwaters into the heart waters and then back out the hand water so we can get her done? You know what I'm saying? So we really talk about the work we do as ecosystem restoration. And I think that's what a lot of today is about, is a new story about the relationship of your community. I love Steph's talk today in the work of Creeklands and hearing about all the amazing projects and efforts and collaborations, and obviously the beaver work in the Central Coast where many of you all are at. And so that this process, that it's really social work, it's community work, it's the collective work of we the people to show up on behalf of our watersheds, and in this case, choose to partner with beaver where appropriate and where we can. OAC, again, as a social change organization, really has our theory of change, or our strategies for change, if you will, is based in 4 pillars. So one of them is modeling resiliency, and that looks like on our 80-acre site, where there's a lot of dirt under the nails, and there's implementation and actualization of a whole lot of things. So we like to, if we're going to teach things, we like to be able to say in our experience when we did, and have a first person or shared narrative about that. the work of training change makers and building community capacity is a lot of similar work that I think is happening there today. And then we are also often involved in policy work at different elevations of government and legalizing some of these ideas that we're working on. So what does it mean to really legalize beaver is kind of what we're talking about today. So we started our Bring Back the Beaver campaign in the early to mid 2000s, but by 2012 it was very well kicked in, and we you'll see some of the efforts of that work, but our beaver flag logo got kicked in then. We were really deeply engaged in a lot more education and outreach, a lot of science, citizen science work, the research and demonstration efforts, and also, again, the focus of this talk is really a lot about the policy work. And that leads really to the fact that beaver in California as a mammal are managed as a public trust resource by the California Department of Fish and Wildlife. And so really CDFW is the primary entity that we've been engaged with around this work. And so by 2022, the legislature, via a budget proposal by Governor Newsom, funded the creation of a brand new
and also
restoration program to be led by CDFW. And what's amazing is that new program has hired 5 permanent positions. They're very focused now on promoting human beaver coexistence strategies. They're in the process of developing a beaver management and restoration plan for the entire state, which will be amazing. And then they've begun conducting several pilot translocations, and we show some slides on and talk about some of those coming up and future there. And then they're doing a lot of education and outreach work. And we also were involved with the Center for Biological Diversity and the Environmental Protection Information Center on a process with the California Fish and Game Commission around a rule change petition to modify the policy on depredation permits. Those are the permits that you can ask the state to kill beaver if you are experiencing perceived or real damage by the beaver. And so we ended up working with them on that in 2019. And as of June of 2023, the new depredation policy by the department really emphasizes and centers non-lethal coexistence strategies up front. And that's a very significant win as well. And so again, on the translocation side, if many may have seen in the news, but the department, in collaboration with the indigenous organization known as the Maidu Summit Consortium up in Plumas County in the North Fork of the Feather River watershed, a tributary into a valley called Tasman Koyom, the California Department of Fish and Wildlife did the first beaver translocation in nearly 75 years and brought a family group of 7 beavers that they had trapped that were down in the Sacramento Valley and were causing problems in a managed wetland system. And it was just thought at that time it was easier for them to decide to move the beavers higher up into the watershed than, say, kill them or otherwise coexist with them down there. And so that was an exciting process for us, Kate and I. It was the culmination of a collaboration that we had with the Maidu Summit Consortium since, say, 2018, and that we produced this beaver recruitment strategy for them as of 2020. And that was really the roadmap or the water map, if you will, to support what was needed to legitimize moving forward with that process. And so for those folks who in the state now who would like beaver and would like to petition the state to bring back beaver, the department has this beaver restoration project proposal form. It's located on their website. You could hit that QR code if you want, or you can search that title. And it's a process that you fill out a form and then submit your intention to the department. One of the things we're excited to say is that this year, we were awarded a grant by the Department of Fish and Wildlife to create a beaver coexistence training and support program. And so that project we're going to do in collaboration with the Beaver Institute, which is a national entity, and their Beaver Corps, which is this amazing training where they train people to be non-lethal coexistence specialists. And so the plan with that is that we will be, we're going to create like a beaver help desk that'll be web-based. Again, we're going to do the Beaver Core training in collaboration with Beaver Institute. And then ultimately we'll have some other resources, and ideally there'll also be funding there. Not ideally, there will be funding there to support some of either the technical, material, or labor needs to offset the impact economically for certain landowners who are wishing to now better coexist with beavers. So that's a very exciting development. And then just to say that as of a couple days ago, our state assembly member, Damon Connolly from the 12th district, has introduced the California Beaver Bill, AB 2196, which is co-sponsored or sponsored by us at the Occidental Ecology Center. That bill just moved out of the appropriations and will go to the floor of the legislature next week. And we are all hoping that it passes. And so it's looking good. And then just to say, as far as what's more coming in 2024, there is going to be a second pilot translocation, and this one will be with the Tule River tribe down on their reservation, which is in the southern Sierra Nevada. Kate will talk about that in a bit. The folks at the Maidu Summit Consortium in their Valley Tasman Koyom are going to receive another family group of beavers because that meadow is so big and has so much amazing habitat. And then the department is considering a third pilot relocation site that is likely going to have a coho nexus in a coastal area, maybe in the North Bay. And then the development of the beaver management and restoration plan is absolutely underway as well. So those are all exciting things happening this year. And just a little bit of then transitioning to the question of, well, how did we get here? And I know for myself, when I first started talking about beavers for coho recovery in the late 90s, early 2000s, was hit with two big forms of pushback right off the get-go. First was, nah, those beaver, for the most part, they're not native to California, or they're only limited to certain areas, the Sacramento, San Joaquin Valley, the Delta, the Klamath, but they weren't on the coast, and they're not native to the Sierra. And there was work in the 1930s that says that from Joseph Grinnell and others. And then also there was a big pushback by the salmon community asserting that beaver were bad for fish and that those beaver dams block fish passage. And so we took those cues from what we heard from folks about that, because we didn't know to what degree they were native or not. And so a group of us, different folks, commenced to do a whole bunch of deep historic ecology and look into the literature and into journals and into newspaper articles and ethnographic literature and archaeofaunal literature. And we ended up publishing a series of papers that you can see here. There are two that were focused on trying to rethink the historic range of beaver. The first paper in 2012 was really looking at the range of beaver in the Sierra Nevada. And then the second paper in 2013 was really looking at the historic range of beaver in coastal California. And Cooper showed this map before, but the one on the right there, the hatched marks on the map is really where it was asserted from the 1930s and 40s that beaver were native to. But the green colored areas surrounded by red is what, based on these two papers plus this novel physical evidence paper, we believe is a much more accurate representation of the distribution of beaver at time of contact. So that was our initial push to try and deepen into bringing a little bit more science and modern understanding to this question about beaver nativity within the state. And then the question around beaver and their benefits. You know, we have been members of several statewide entities, and specifically the Salmonid Restoration Federation is a group that we've been working with for quite a while. And that's a statewide group. And so we really got into the question about beaver and salmon, and we really brought in a lot of literature and studies from other states, in Oregon and Washington especially, some of the stuff that Cooper showed with the steelhead up in the John Day system there. And I think pretty much at some point, when you really look at the science and you look at it on the ground, everybody in the salmon community, at least in the North Coast, has gotten clear that when all is said and done at a population level, not individual dam by dam level, that the presence of beaver in and salmonids is a beneficial relationship and has been for a very long time. So much so that we were given the Golden Pipe Award for beaver as an innovative restoration tool back in 2012. We also worked a lot with the Sierra Meadows Partnership, because this is a group of folks looking at not just Sierra Meadows, but meadows in the Southern Cascades. Some of the work that, again, Cooper showed of the one meadow where the process-based restoration work was being done, and introducing or supporting a new look at beaver in those meadows, because again, the conventional wisdom was that beaver were not native to those areas. And so any beaver that were there were considered to be non-natives and a nuisance. And I think the scientific community wasn't really tapped into wanting to acknowledge and leverage in a positive way their relationship to beaver. So that was a lot of really fun work to be done. And a lot of this kind of work, and we may suggest that some of you do this kind of process, is what's called a power map. And it's really, we were looking to assess towards changing policy. And so on these power maps, you put in little boxes all of the various, quote, stakeholders or agencies or entities or user groups that you think are affected by what beaver might do in your watershed, pro or con. And the folks you think who oppose your objectives are on the left, and the folks who support your objectives are on the right. And if they have more influence, they're up higher. If they have less influence, they're down lower. So you can kind of see there's a mosaic, and this is what our mosaic looked like in 2012. But by 2022, our power map, when we remapped it, we had significantly pushed a number of the critical leverage points and decision makers from the opposed side over to the support side. And Governor Newsom and the Natural Resources Secretary Wade Crowfoot, or the California Department of Fish and Wildlife through Director Chuck Bonham, a number of the federal agencies, many NGOs, tribal groups, trout folks, salmon folks, mountain meadow folks, had significantly pushed over. And that was that decade's worth of work to shift the power map was a lot of work. And in some ways you could say there was a lot of fighting going on, but we're not really beaver fighters, we're beaver lovers. And so I'm going to turn it over now to Kate and let her talk about some of the work that we did from there. All right.
Thanks so much, Brock. Wonderful. All right. I'm going to hide my screen controls and make sure that we are good to go. Wonderful. Hi, everyone. Wow. Thanks for coming out on a Saturday to be part of this amazing event. I'm so grateful to have been invited and really happy to share what we've got going on. So as Brock has already elucidated, we've been working at this for a while, and it's really fun to be able to share some successes and to share what has gone on behind the scenes and in collaboration with so many people across the state. So as Cooper had already mentioned in his fantastic talk, beaver can provide really valuable habitat to a lot of different species. And so for us, because California has so many listed species and endemic species that only occur here, and there's a lot of effort and energy and money really going into recovering these species, it's so helpful to connect the dots between the habitat that beaver provide and how they specifically can benefit those species that we are so, trying to save and recover, particularly our western pond turtle, coho salmon, we've got Cascades frogs here, our willow flycatcher, and so on. So that has been a really important part of the conversation of how to support those that are working with those species to leverage what beaver can do for them and help them achieve their restoration and recovery goals. Also, we've been talking a lot about the science today, and some of our science partners aren't even aware that there's this question about beaver. Are they native? Are they beneficial? All of these things. And so a big part of our effort has been to really having conversations with the scientific community and making sure that they're aware of these issues that we're upfront, that we're facing, and to study the issues if there are questions and concerns. I know this is a question with Southern Steelhead, and we invite more research to figure out, is it in fact the problem that it is perceived to be? For us in the Sierra, there's been some great work where, for example, looking at the habitat that beaver can provide for our endangered willow flycatcher, it turns out it's super beneficial, as you can see from the graph in the middle. the likelihood of willow flycatcher occupancy increased with beaver dam density. And so there's this one-to-one correlation of more beaver habitat, more willow flycatcher, which for a bird that is really crashing and going downhill right now, this is really heartening news. And similarly, research that was done and is continuing to be done in Childs Meadow to look at the effects of beaver benefits to biodiversity and carbon sequestration has been really instrumental as well, so we can all educate one another and make sure that we're all on the same page. Some other really amazing research up in the Smith River watershed, in a place where the beaver aren't building dams. They don't need to. It's a big enough river and deep enough that they don't need to use that strategy. Turns out their bank burrows alone and the stick piles that they push out in front once they're done peeling them provide this incredible habitat for a whole suite of native species. And so we really appreciate both the dam complexes that beaver can provide, and we don't want to overlook the value of simply bank burrows and stick piles that beaver are providing. This is a whole understudied resource benefit that we want to encourage people to keep looking into in our systems across California. Similarly, Cooper already mentioned a lot of the benefits, and this, we are in this climate change moment, and we are really needing to help, again, our audience connect the beaver benefits to the pressing climate resilience issues, and really seeing firsthand how we can, again, do this process in beaver-based restoration in a way that makes us all more resilient so that we can attenuate our peak flood waters and recharge our groundwater and improve our water quality, sequestering carbon, and create landscape scale fire resiliency. Similarly, a big strategy of ours has been, there's all of this work going into planning to recover species, to, in our state wildlife action plans, our forest plan revision processes. This is an ongoing effort. And if there is a positive nexus between beaver and recovery of these systems, these species, we want to make sure that we get beaver restoration actions listed in those plans. And we have successfully done that with the coho recovery plans and state wildlife action plan and other plans. And this really just helps legitimize beaver restoration as a useful tool, and helps people understand that that's something that they could do that fits into these plans and could possibly be funded because it's there in the plans. Also, we really want to promote a understanding that beaver restoration requires a holistic approach with a variety of actions. People get really excited when they learn about beaver restoration. It's like, yay, we want to move beaver. Let's go move beaver. That becomes kind of the most exciting element of this, which it is. It's amazingly exciting. And the reality is there are many steps that we want to consider and do before we consider relocation. One of the biggest ones is coexistence, which Brock has already mentioned with our new program that we're going to be standing up. Being able to demonstrate and share successful coexistence efforts and have them be in partnership with important agencies who are having the conflicts themselves, transportation agencies like Caltrans, our federal agencies, Forest Service, for example, our land users, ranchers, duck club owners, those that are actually struggling to coexist with beaver. If we can support them in finding these solutions and having them be really successful, and then we can share those results, really makes a difference and increases greater acceptance and adoption of coexistence. We have a lot of beaver in California. Thankfully, they weren't extirpated. So really reminding ourselves that taking care of the ones that we have first is always the best step, because in fact, that's how most of our beaver are killed in California, is because of a result of a conflict. So we can do better, and we're excited to support our state and you all in doing that as well. Creating and sharing results from best beaver restoration demo sites with strategic audiences is really helpful as well. This is the famed Doty Ravine site near the state capitol in a foothill town called Lincoln, owned by the Placer Land Trust. And they had gone from killing the beaver because they were eating their restoration vegetation to embracing the beaver, signing a peace treaty, being funded to actually give the beaver more space by notching the levees and reinforcing the beaver dams, expanding, enhancing, and really just leveraging this collaboration so that they could accelerate the pace of restoration in an incredible fashion. So in less than 4 years, for under $75,000, they were able to increase this wetted area by 1,200%. And this is a working landscape with cattle that come on here every season. And it allowed the leasees to keep the cattle on the landscape for a month longer. Huge success. So gratefully, it's 45-minute bus ride from the Capitol, and we can bring out our decision makers, our agency leads, resource directors, and whatnot. Like you see here, CDFW Director Chuck Bonham came out for a tour that we did towards that end to really educate these folks about the benefits of beaver restoration and BDAs and all of those things, and huge success to be able to do that. So having that kind of site where you have that kind of lift happening that you can show others is really helpful. Also, really important to uplift and leverage our privilege to support our tribal partners and other under-recognized allies. We've been really grateful for the work that we've been able to do by invitation with, as Brock already mentioned, the Mighty Summit Consortium up in Tasman-Coyom, and with the Tule River Nation down in the Southern Sierra. And both of these entities have really wanted to reclaim their ancestral right to having access and getting to work with this cultural keystone that Beaver is for them. And it's huge to be able to support them in doing this, and so grateful that both entities now are getting to actually return beaver to their ancestral lands that they are managing. It's also important to build our beaver and process-based restoration networks to gather and share results. We have a great California process-based restoration network that Cooper is a part of, as are others. And it's just a really ripe community of people sharing ideas, practices, permitting pathways, funding opportunities. We have online meetings mostly, and then we do a field component where we train how to build like a beaver every fall, and really good times and just great progress and collaboration and really just cross-pollination to help further these efforts. Also super helpful to support our existing and to encourage the creation of more community groups that are stewarding our local beaver colonies. Shout out to the Slow Beaver Brigade and Santa Barbara Beaver Brigade and all of the other entities that are emerging to really own their local beaver population in a way that they're looking out for them and making sure that there aren't conflicts, and if there are, that there are technical and financial resources to support the conflict and being resolved in a good way. So shout out to you all who are doing that really important work. It's also really helpful to enlist our citizen scientists to make beaver observations. We too heard about the Pismo Beach beaver. Amazing. And we need more eyes on beaver because we do not have a complete data set. The department is now working on it, and it's very much a work in progress. And so we rely on everyone to contribute in this way to help us better understand where our beaver are, what they're doing, how they're doing, and all of that. I also would be remiss in saying it wasn't helpful to leverage the media. We've been really grateful for all of the attention that Beaver gets. It helps to have a charismatic creature that you're working with like Beaver. And really just through all the great work of everyone in articulating the benefits and showing, all of these amazing examples, it's really helped build and sustain this momentum. Also, having Ben Goldfarb write the book Eager and have a whole chapter about California and the work of our campaign and other people's work has also really helped put beaver in California on the map and really help sustain that interest and willingness to take it seriously and to further investigate, support, and uplift the work that we all are doing. In 2021, we did finally hire a beaver lobbyist, and that has been remarkably helpful and effective, building upon the momentum that we had already created. To have someone who is full-time representing beaver in our state capital and leading our state beaver policy working group has also been immensely fruitful. I can't speak to how important that has been to just help us maintain relationships with the people that we need to maintain relationships, and to have the conversations that we can't have because we're out busy doing all the other things. And it's been really a wonderful collaboration, and we're so grateful for all the work that Jennifer Fearing and everyone else has done in this space with us. And our coalition building has really helped as well. We, over the years, have rallied our Beaver posse to come together and really get behind different efforts that we're trying to support. And in this case, in 2021, we were trying to make sure that beaver and process-based restoration were included in the California Natural and Working Lands Climate Smart Strategy. And through this amazing effort of gathering over 100 different signatories, we were successful. And that really just shows a lot of how this community of people that are interested in beaver, it really is diverse, and it really is broad across the state, and motivated to really make sure that we're able to do this kind of work that we want to do with beaver. So in the end, persistence really pays off, and I'm so grateful in my lifetime that we've gotten to see this kind of change with our department. You know, California Department of Fish and Wildlife was very against beaver restoration, not only moving beaver, but all of the other aspects as well. And so to have them just completely do this 180-degree turn and now be creating this program and management plan and carrying out all of these conservation translocations and really being willing to have these conversations is really gratifying. And we really attribute it to just many years of building relationships, learning to recognize and cultivate ripeness and not move before the time is right. We've had people wanting to introduce legislation for the past 2 decades, and it hasn't been ripe. And now the legislation that Brock talked about, it's really at this point simply to just say that we want the beaver restoration program that was funded through a budget amendment to be codified and become permanent, so it's no longer vulnerable to the whims of budget changes like we're facing right now with our big deficit in the state. Speaking of deficits, resources, super important. Technical resources, the scientific backing, and having all of the financial resources. There have been so many people that have contributed financially to this work, and we're so grateful for every single one of you. And it's so important to be able to gather those resources and put them to good use. And I would be remiss if I didn't say that it is also about retirements. There have been some folks in higher positions of power who were not interested in beaver restoration, and it really took them retiring to help really move the needle. So with that, that's the end of our talk for now, and we'd love to stick around and answer questions. And this is a booklet that we created, Beaver in California, that you can look up online. We're in the process of updating it right now along with our website, and look forward to the conversation with you all. And I will stop sharing my screen. Yay, we can see hands. Thank you all.
Great, thank you so much, Kate and Brock. I'm behind the camera. Let's see. Does anyone in person have any questions? I will repeat them to the mic. Mm-hmm.
So I'm just interested in kind of hearing why it might be at the dam.
Yeah, so they said, Brock mentioned there's a difference in how beaver populations affect salmon populations at the dam level as opposed to the population level. And if you could expand on that? Okay, that was the question.
I was just trying to invoke that at a landscape scale or a population scale, there's a larger pattern of benefit, and there may be at times an individual dam in a moment in a season that may present some issues to the fish, but in the aggregate, as populations co-evolve with each other over the years, over the generations, the presence of beaver and salmon together has co-evolved symbiotically to each other's benefit. And so it's not that, so it's, yeah, it's just trying to parse out that differential. Because I think there's sometimes folks want to highlight a specific individual location and claim that that is expressive of a whole pattern or a whole process.
Great, thank you, Brock. And I'm going to switch to a virtual question and go back and forth. John asks in the chat, what are the major obstacles to beaver reintroduction in Morro Bay watersheds like Chorrell Creek and Los Osos Creek, if you have any knowledge of those two?
You want to take it, Kate? Or
Well, I don't have enough knowledge to be able to speak to that, other than I understand that there are some concerns with nymphs and southern steelhead interactions with beavers specifically. And so that, I think, would be in what I'm aware of the issues and concerns, that would be obviously a big one. And if you look through the California Department of Fish and Wildlife's form that Brock put the code up for, you know, the information they're really interested in learning about is, what is the habitat like? What is the flow like? What, you know, is there vegetation that would support beaver? And basically all of the habitat considerations that you go through when considering whether or not a place is good. And then, you know, what are your neighbor and adjacent landowners, you know, are they in support or not, and other concerns, et cetera. So there's a whole process that the department has, a whole checklist. And so I think if there is interest there, then it's all incumbent on you all to gather together your people who know the habitat, who know the fisheries concerns, who know all the different stories that are being told through your engagement with those systems, and aggregating those all and putting them together and filling out these forms and seeing, like, are we able to answer all of these questions? And from there, then being able to determine whether or not it would make a good proposal. Brock, you want to add to that?
no, I think I just resonate with that. I think, as Kate said, now that, yeah, go through the exercise of trying to fill out the proposal that CDFW has for you, and it will be illuminating. You may not end up pushing go and submitting the proposal because it'll highlight for you opportunities or needs. It's like a limiting factors analysis, similar to what you would do if you're, you know, with any other listed species or a salmon recovery process. And I think the work of Creeklands and staff, listening to the talk and just knowing Steph for so many years, you know, like I know you all have amazing capacity to take that on. So we look forward to seeing what you come up with.
Thank you, Kate and Brock. Any more in-person questions? Okay, we'll turn to a virtual question again. Carla asked, please tell us about the permitting process in general of BDAs and what can we expect re-permitting?
Well, you know, as with such questions like this, there's the age-old answer of it depends. So what are the conditions of the system that a BDA, so whether that's a beaver dam analog or that you are proposing to place some type of constructed structure that may be low-tech PBR like Cooper was showing us or not, in a channel of a creek, in a waterway, to do something to it, then there are permitting entities like California Department of Fish and Wildlife and their lake bed stream alteration agreements. There's the Regional Water Quality Control Board. There may be Army Corps of Engineers. There may be water rights concerns. And so the county may have it. So I'm not trying to punt on the question, but I think there are so many variables with respect to which administrative or agency permitting nexus is going to be invoked based on the scale of the project. The higher you are up in the watershed, the less perennial those waterways are, the less that they support fish and aquatic life. The regulatory layers get a whole lot less. And as you go lower down in the system, they increase. So some of that upland work that Cooper was talking about, maybe in the what are known as like first order streams high up in the watershed that are seasonal, dry, just deliver sediment and water when it rains. BDAs or upland process-based restoration fuels to flows, gully stuffing projects are need a whole lot less permitting than if you're way down at the bottom of the system in a main stem perennial waterway that has an active run of steelhead, for instance.
Great, thank you. Any more in-person questions?
I would just add one more thing to the permitting is that we do have folks that are getting these permitted in other parts of the state that can be resources. And so, for example, our U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service Partners Program, a lot of their staff, particularly in the Sierra and the foothills and in the North Coast, have gone through permitting processes. As you know, our early adopters, the Scott River Watershed Council, they cut their teeth on getting BDAs permitted. Like, when was that, Brock? 15 years ago. So it's been a while. And so this work has been done. You don't have to completely reinvent the wheel. And it is very case by case dependent. Depends on your own regulatory staff, what their education is, and what your own conditions are in the site that you're trying to do this work.
Great, thank you. And then Cooper had a question.
Yeah.
Do you want to speak up?
Huh?
Do you want to speak up just so I don't?
Yeah, so my question is, if a landowner has a beaver move onto their property, could you talk about what it would look like for someone to coexist with a beaver on their property? What are the techniques they can use, and what those look like?
Sure. Yeah, happy to start with that. There's so many different great ways to coexist with beaver, and apologies if we didn't go deep into the specifics there, but the biggest concerns usually are beavers messing with the water, and that can either look like causing flooding through building dams if they're in the creek, and so you can put in flexible pond levelers through the dam that then you get to set the height at and make sure that the flooding, that you get to keep the beaver. You set it at a height that so the beaver will stick around. You keep them, you keep the benefits, but the flooding stops because the leveler basically acts as a spillway that at base flow drains the water. Similarly, beavers love to block culverts because they're just, for them, that roadbed with a pipe in it is just a hole in a dam. So they want to fill it and be able to make the water go higher, which can cause more flooding or issues with roadways. So you can put fencing around the culvert and prevent them from blocking that. And those are really low cost and effective. And we've done it actually with Caltrans District 5. We have done some flow control devices in Prunedale. So Caltrans in your area is aware of these techniques. And then also, Brock, you want to talk about trees and our beaver backsaver?
Sure. So yeah, besides interrupting what flow or blocking passage of water, then they may be chewing down vegetation that you don't want them to chew down, whether that's native trees or grapevines or fruit trees or other things. And so there's a whole process of tree wrapping, and it's not that complicated, but you want to make sure you use the right gauge wire, not lightweight chicken wire. And again, all of these techniques are articulated widely across the web and on our website, and this will be kind of the core types of things that our new coexistence training and support program is going to really be supporting you all with. And then Kate did mention, so in the Central Valley, especially up in the Sacramento system, where it's a very wide, low gradient, flattish valley, where you've got a lot of gravity fed irrigation into duck clubs, rice paddies, wildlife refuges. Boy, the beavers love to gum up the works, the concrete weirs that have a gate valve in them where you can, let water in and out to flood paddies there. It's a very low-hanging fruit for beaver to gum up. And so in the one slide that Kate showed on coexistence, in the center was this beaver backsaver device, which the Sutter National Wildlife Refuge folks initially invented, and we've helped kind of support them in adapting it and promoting it. And we have a wonderful web page on that. We have a video about that and a actual technical guidance, kind of a DIY guide if you want, on construction details. If you're handy with a welder and things, it's not that complicated. So anyway, there's lots of tools in the toolbox, and it, again, kind of depending on what you're facing, then you adapt.
Great, thank you. Any last questions? Okay, I think that's it. So give it up one more time for Kate and Brock, please.
Thanks, everyone.
All right. Bye, everyone.